should be further along than where we are. We all should know more Scripture than we do. We should all know the Lord more intimately than we do. And unfortunately, the church today isn't doing a real great job at cultivating disciples. They're not doing a great job. They're not taking what it is we know to be true about God and grafting it into the lives of Christians. They're not doing it well enough. We need better discipleship plans. I admit that. I'm not very good at that. I ought to be better at taking young men and discipling them, training them up. The women ought to be taking the women and doing a better job at that, training them up. And we all ought to be doing better. We all ought to be further along than what we are. One of the many reasons why we're not further along, I mentioned last week, if you want to look at Hebrews chapter 2, verse 1, therefore we ought to give the more earnest heed to the things which we have heard, lest at any time we should let them slip. We ought to listen and do what it is we've heard. And if we don't, the truth slips away from us. 1 John 2:7, brethren, I write no new commandment unto you, but an old commandment which ye had from the beginning. The old commandment is the word which ye had heard from the beginning. Now, what the writer is talking about here, what the Apostle John is referring to here, is not a commandment that's new. The commandment isn't a new commandment. It's actually a commandment that was given back in John. Turn over to John chapter 13. John chapter 13, verse 34, where he says, a new commandment I give unto you. It was new back then. Now it's not so new. And he says this, a new commandment I give unto you, that ye love one another, as I have loved you, that ye also love one another. Now, love is a very crucial thing, and we're going to talk about it a little bit tonight. Verse 35, by this love is what he's referring to. By this love that you have one for another. Listen to what he says, verse 35. By this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, if ye have love one for another. The goal in discipleship is to love one another. And we are obviously far from where we ought to be.